Welcome to a new style here on the channel. I want you to dive into the story in a different way. From now on, the visuals won't be the main focus. Instead, I want you to feel each word, each detail. You to close your eyes, or let the video play while you relax in a quiet place. Whether that's your room with the lights off, or even in the car on a night drive. I'll guide you into this experience. And if you're listening with headphones, get ready because every sound is designed to make you feel the tension of the story. By the way, where are you listening to this story from? Let me know in the comments.
Well, I'm just a farmer from a small town deep in Kansas called Sterling. It's a simple little place with just over 2,000 folks. Around here, everyone knows who's passing through the streets. I grew up here, and my family has owned this land for generations, since my grandpa's time, and I've always been attached to the farm. It's a hard life, but an honest one, and I don't have much more than my little piece of land, my corn, and my small house. Life here doesn't change much. I wake up real early, even before the sun comes up on the horizon, drink my coffee, strong and hot, the one my wife leaves ready for me, and head out to check on the cornfield. I handle the planting, plowing, watering, everything myself. I only get a bit of help from a neighbor now and then, but he doesn't come by every day. The corn crop doesn't bring in much, but it's enough to keep the family going. But ever since last summer, things have been different around here, and not in a good way. I'll start at the beginning. It was June, and we were getting ready for the late July harvest. I had put up a new scarecrow in the middle of the field. It was a simple thing, made with some old clothes I found in the shed and some pieces of wood. I even used an old plaid shirt I didn't wear anymore. With an old hat and some rope for hands, the scarecrow looked good enough to scare off a few crows. I put it right in the middle of the field where it could see everything. I thought I'd done a good job, even if it was just a bundle of rags and wood. For the first few days, the scarecrow stayed put, and I didn't think much about it. My worries were about the corn, the weather, pests, the usual things that come with living off the land. But then I started noticing something odd. Every time I went to the field, it seemed like the scarecrow was in a slightly different place. At first I thought it was just me imagining things, or maybe the wind had moved it, though it seemed strange since I'd tied it down nice and tight. But it got worse. Some days it seemed a lot closer to the edge of the field, and other days more toward the center. It seemed impossible, but there it was. Always in a new spot, like it had moved itself during the night. And this kept happening until one day I was out in the field and I saw it with my own eyes. I swear I saw the scarecrow shifting positions while I was standing right there looking at it. It was quick, just a little movement, but it leaned or moved somehow. I froze inside, but I didn't tell anyone about it, not even my wife. I figured it was just my mind playing tricks, or maybe I was just tired. The situation kept going. Every day the scarecrow seemed a little more out of place. So one morning, I decided I'd had enough. I grabbed a shovel and took the scarecrow out of the field. I put it in the shed where I was sure it wouldn't bother me anymore. I felt a little calmer after that, thought I'd solved the problem. But the next morning, guess what? There it was, right in the middle of the field again, as if it had never been moved. I felt this horrible feeling in my stomach, but I was still trying to find a logical explanation for it. I spent the day feeling uneasy, wondering who might be messing with the scarecrow. Could it be some kid playing a prank on me, I thought. But it was too strange because I'd never seen anyone sneaking onto my property, and I would have heard anyone trying. Night came, and I went to bed with my head full of ideas, but I was determined to sort it out. The next morning, I went to the field before the sun came up. I grabbed the scarecrow and took it back to the shed. This time, I hid it in the darkest corner, piled some junk in front of it, and locked the door tight. Let's see if it comes back now, I thought, kinda laughing at myself. Well, the next day, there it was again. in the exact spot where I'd first placed it. I just stood there, looking at it, not knowing what to do, and I had this tight feeling in my chest I can't explain. It wasn't fear. It was more like knowing something was wrong, something I didn't have an answer for. So I decided I needed a permanent solution. This whole thing was getting to my head, and I couldn't keep living like this. That night, I took the Scarecrow out of the cornfield, away from my property. I went all the way to the edge of the river that runs through town and left it there on the bank. The idea was to get rid of it for good. I headed back home, feeling relieved, thinking I'd finally taken care of it. But the next day, there it was again, standing in the middle of the field in that same strange posture, like it was watching me. That time, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a gas can, went out to the Scarecrow, and burned it right there in the middle of the cornfield. I stood there, watching the flames eat up that thing. I didn't know what I was expecting to happen, but at least that way it couldn't come back, right? I felt kind of ridiculous, but I had to get rid of it. I spent the whole day with the smell of smoke clinging to my clothes and hands, but I was relieved. I went to bed thinking I'd finally ended it, but the next morning, there it was, the Scarecrow, exactly the same. In the same position, in the same place. I just stood there, frozen, not knowing what to think or do. I'd burned it, destroyed it, and still, there it was. After that, I didn't try to get rid of it anymore. I just started avoiding it. I still look after the field, but I keep my distance from the Scarecrow, pretending it's not there, like it's not watching me. Whatever it is, it seems like it's determined to stay there, in my field, like it's waiting for something. Now I live with that thing in my cornfield. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to know anymore. I just get on with life as best I can, ignoring the Scarecrow like it's just a piece of wood and cloth. But deep down, I know it's not just that. Something in it is watching me, and it feels like it's never going to leave. I think I'll start this story by explaining the reason that led me to spend the night in that cornfield, because to be honest, it wasn't something I wanted to do. But the situation wasn't easy. I have a small piece of land in a tiny town in Kansas called Belleville. It's a quiet place, but lately some vandals had been sneaking into crops, messing with the harvest or even stealing part of it. For me, not being a big farmer and depending on what I harvest to make a living, this was a blow. It was late October and the corn was tall, ripe, and ready to be harvested in a few weeks. But the previous week, I found a good portion of the crop trampled and scattered. Probably a group of kids, but who knows? I just knew that I wasn't going to let that happen again. My wife even suggested hiring someone to watch over it. But paying for that kind of thing is a luxury we can't afford. So I decided I'd stand guard myself with a flashlight, a beach chair, and a thick blanket to keep warm in the cold night. I got out there around 9:30 at night. The sky was clear, a lot of stars scattered about, and there was a full moon, which helped with the lighting a bit. Even so, the cornfield casts strange shadows that you don't notice during the day. There's a dirt road that runs alongside, but almost nobody passes by at night. I set the chair near where the corn rows begin and settled in, ready to stay there until morning if I had to. At first it was calm. The wind made the corn leaves rustle, and it created a constant noise, kind of relaxing, you know. I was listening to every sound, anything that might seem out of place. Folks who work in the field get good at telling apart the sound of wind, an animal, or even a small critter passing by. But for a good 2 hours it was just me, the wind, and the sound of the leaves. It was around 2 in the morning that I noticed something. A figure, pretty tall, seemed to be walking between the rows, about 30 feet from where I was. He was moving slowly, like he wasn't in a rush, and he was wearing a hat. That threw me off because it wasn't common for anyone to be out there in the middle of the night, and honestly, nobody had any reason to be wandering through my cornfield. I got up from the chair and called out to the guy. "Hey, who's there?" But he didn't answer, just kept walking as if he hadn't heard. I tried shouting louder, but the guy didn't seem to care. That started to irritate me, so I decided to go after him. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking, trying to follow him. The problem was, the more I walked, the further he seemed to get. And I couldn't see his face because of the shadow from the hat. I kept trying to get closer, but the rows of corn form a maze, and sometimes it felt like I was more lost than on his trail. Even so, I could hear his footsteps, heavy and slow, like he wasn't in any hurry. And the worst part was a faint laugh, almost like a whisper coming from somewhere, but I couldn't tell exactly where. I'd stop, look around, but never managed to see where the sound was coming from. At that point, I was tired of walking and started feeling a bit foolish for being out there in the middle of the cornfield, alone, in the cold, chasing a stranger who wouldn't respond. I got that feeling that maybe it'd be better to go back to my chair and wait for morning. But just when I thought about giving up, I heard the sound of footsteps again, closer this time, like he'd circled around and come right near me. I pointed my flashlight in every direction, trying to light up what I could, but saw nothing. Just the corn, still and quiet, but the sound was still there, like someone was walking around me. After a while, I realized I no longer knew exactly where I was. Everything looked the same, the tall corn rows all around me. What should have been a simple walk to follow a stranger had turned into a maze I couldn't find my way out of. I tried following the sounds, but they seemed to move, like someone was toying with me, making me walk in circles. I stood there for a moment, thinking about what to do, when I heard that laugh again, this time clearer but still distant, like it was coming from all around. A low, raspy laugh that rose and fell, kind of ghostly, and I just stood there, not sure if I should run or keep trying to find a way out. Time passed, and I no longer knew how many hours had gone by. All I know is I was starting to feel the cold in my hands and face. I'd left my blanket by the chair, and I regretted not bringing it with me. The flashlight started flickering, and I had to give it a few taps to get it working again. The battery was dying, and as it faded, the shadows around seemed to come to life. When the first hint of light appeared on the horizon, I was completely exhausted. It felt like I'd spent the whole night being followed, but never seeing who was actually there. As soon as the sun began to light up the field, the sounds of footsteps and laughter stopped, like they'd vanished into thin air. I found my way back to where I'd left my chair, but the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave my head. I was tired, but that night didn't feel real, like a strange dream I'd just woken up from. All I know is after that night, I decided I'd never stand guard in the cornfield again. I don't know what that figure was, but I don't want to find out either.